welcome. I don't know how many we've got on the call tonight, but I can see we're quite represented from around the Northern American continent. So good. What would it be over there? Good afternoon to you. Good evening from England and Liverpool here. I hope you're all well. I guess probably I should explain some of the context behind this. So Sean got in touch with me and asked, it would help if I shared my screen here, wouldn't it? Here we go. I'm one of those people that, as you'll notice, that has about 1,000 internet window tabs up, which is very bad for productivity. There we go. I think that's working now. Let's present, and there we are. Yeah. So hopefully you can see that the putting slides together isn't a great strength of mine. But yeah, Sean contacted me a while ago and asked if I would come on and talk to you guys just about coach development. And then when push came to shove and it was, well, we want you to do a presentation, I kind of pushed back a bit and said, well, I don't really do presentations, and I don't, as Sean mentioned, my job is a coach developer. So spend a lot of time out on the grass in classrooms, working one-to-one or in group settings with coaches. But I guess we're moving away from the days of kind of traditional chalk and talk, stand at the front with dozens of slides and reel them out to you. I think in this day and age as well, I guess the purpose behind those is becoming less and less. Now we're becoming more and more connected. So this, I thought, well, what am I going to do here? It's just a bit daunting because I don't really have anything off the shelf. And then I realized that 2019, which seems a long time ago now, I finished a master's degree in sports coaching that was brilliantly put together with the University of Worcester and the Football Association. So it took us over 3 years to do, and this lengthy, academically worded title is the resulting thesis, if you like, or the independent study that I did over the course of last year. And what I'll go through is, if I can get this to work, there we go. I'll go through the context and the rationale. So, why did I choose this study? What did we actually do, or what did I actually do? How did I analyze the data, and explain the results, conclusions, and so what? There's a few caveats really though, and apologies to any sociologists, academics on the webinar. I am not an expert in anything, and I'm definitely not an expert researcher. This is my debut at having a go at research, which, if any of you have done academic research before, can be extremely messy, which I found out, but that's part of the enjoyment, I guess. So there is fraught with bias. I'm involved in football here in the northwest of England, heavily, in a professional and a voluntary capacity. The sample itself, I'll explain a little bit more about that, but it's quite a small sample. So don't be drawing too many concrete conclusions from what I'm about to present to you. But what I really want to do is hopefully stimulate some thought. And I really, really want to encourage some disagreement and some debate. The presentation I don't envisage lasting so long. It was something that I did at the Cluster for Research into Coaching conference back in September in Worcester. And the presentation itself only lasted about 10 minutes or so. But I think the important bit will be what does this mean for us? So I'll get into it anyway, and hopefully we can generate some good questions and some good discussion and debate afterwards. So northwest of England, specifically where I live, we have quite a lot of leagues, and what I mean, youth leagues. So organisations that run football or competitive football experiences for children right up to adults. So if you look on any given Saturday, if you and your team was lifted over here, you would have the choice of perhaps 19 different leagues that you could apply to and join, which has its pros and cons. In some respects, it means that the leagues have to try and offer a good service because there's competition from the organisation down the road. So we can't just treat our clubs and teams poorly because there's other alternatives. But on the flip side of that, what it does do is dilute the talent right across. So so let's take the opposite end of the spectrum to this. If there was only one league, you would have every team in the local area bunched together, and the talent would, I guess, find a natural hierarchy that it could play against. So what I really wanted to get into is to understand better what teenagers feel about football and competition, because that's a word that has been muddied somewhat over the last 10, 15 years, certainly that I've worked in football. It's almost become a bit of a taboo, the word competition and competitive football. And I, having had some of the best times of my life on a football field, in competitive situations, I find that hard to agree with. So I really wanted to dig into what do the teenagers of today around here in this what is a football hotbed in the northwest of England, what do they feel about competition, and what do they want about competition, and what are the elements within competition that are important to them, and to dig into that. So being somebody who facilitates conversations a lot at work in my day job, I thought that a focus group would be the best way to go in terms of the methods. So what I did was I ran a pilot study with the team that I coached at the time last year, were under 15s. And it was, if you take nothing else from tonight, I would just encourage you to run something akin to a focus group. It doesn't have to be so formal, but if you coach players, just having the opportunity to sit down with the boys that I coach and ask some questions and really encourage them to speak openly and honestly was one of the best things that I got out of this. And it had really, it had some impact on the research, but much more impact on my own coaching. So after learning quite a lot on how poor I am at hosting focus groups with teenagers after the first pilot, it was back to the drawing board a little bit, and I came up with what were task-based focus groups. And the reason why I wanted task-based, I don't know if you can see the image on the right there, but that is, or indeed if you know who they are, that's Kevin and Perry. They are from a TV series here in the UK. I don't know if you've got it out in the States, called Harry Enfield. But basically, Kevin and Perry play two kind of stereotypical teenagers. When any question that they're asked, they just respond with a grunt. And that is exactly what I was worried about going into these focus groups, that I would just ask these boys a question about football, and the kind of response might be, okay, whatever. So I'd done some reading and found that tasks are quite a good way to stimulate discussion and conversation. So you can see there the tasks. There were two particular tasks. The first thing I did was print out all the results from that current season that the boys and the teams had just played in, just to kind of stimulate some memory about the games that they played in. And then you'll see two decks of cards there. So one deck of cards, there were 3 cards. One says hard opponent, one says equal opponent, and one says easy opponent. And then the second deck of cards there was around certainty. So uncertain underdog, uncertain favorite, certain loss, certain win. So they would, and I'll come on to how we use those tasks in a moment. So 3 under 15s teams locally here. Important to note, there was quite a wide range of ability. So although they were only maybe 2 divisions apart, we had a real range of win-loss records. So there was one team who had only won a handful of games in the last, say, 6 years. There was one team who a lot of the boys had been in and around academy football, who, really good players, but had quite a neutral win-loss record. And then one team who had a really high win-loss record. So they were consistently at the top of their division, or they were for the season that they just played in anyway. So I thought I got quite a nice range of experiences that the boys had played in. So recorded these focus groups and started to analyze the data, which was basically the AirPods that I've got on at the moment. recording the conversations on the phone and walking and listening and just taking notes and seeing what comes back. It's funny what happens when you listen back to conversations and what you take from them the second and third time round. But basically, we without getting too jargony or too technical, I went through what's called a thematic analysis. So taking what was there, 84 pages of transcripts and 26,000 words, and starting to just pull out little quotes and tag them. I would say this is where the kind of researchers who are maybe on the call will start tearing their hair out at my sloppiness here. But basically, just looking at all these quotes and just adding tags to them, and then clustering these tags, and keep going through this kind of pruning process until you arrive at the final results, which were 4 key themes, if you like. And those 4 themes were challenge, proving, pressure, and fairness. So I'll talk a little bit about what was within those themes now. So as you can see from the cards there, what the results within the challenge theme were that, and some of these might surprise us, some of these results might kind of make us think, they might sting a little bit, but this is what this group, or these 3 groups of teenagers here in the northwest of England were saying about football. So when I asked them to rank in order who they would prefer to play, hard opponent consistently came out at the top. So they wanted this challenge, and the other consistent one was that they put easy opponent straight to the bottom. So tell us in order, who do you prefer to play, and put those cards in the order. You know, when you get up on a Saturday morning, who do you want to play against? And consistently, they want to play against hard opponents. And the reason is because they want to be tested and they want to be challenged. And on the flip side of that, so they don't like games where they win too easy. So, for example, if you get a whitewash scoreline, it's a really frowned upon thing in terms of what the teenagers are saying to us. So although it might feel good for us adults, you know, coming away with a nice 10-0, 15-0 victory, actually, and you can look at sport often, and certainly football, as what's called a zero-sum game. So for your team to, if your team was playing my team, if your team wins, my team loses. So that's what's called a zero-sum game. But the results of this study certainly would suggest that a whitewash in terms of what young people feel about the game is a lose-lose negative-sum game that nobody really benefits. And actually the apathy for playing a really mismatched opponent, a really weaker opponent, it was coming through very strong. So there's this kind of a striving to play a hard opponent, but not too hard, if you like. So they want tough, challenging games, but not where it's a complete whitewash. And these results can be extended to leagues as well as individual matches. So we got talking about formats and competitions. One of the teams had actually played, I think, 1 or 2 games to reach a divisional cup final, and it really wasn't a big deal to them. So to the adults, it might be a big thing that we get the ribbons out, we get the big ground to play the big main event out. But what the teenagers were saying is we didn't really do much to get there. We didn't really feel that we'd achieved much. It wasn't much of a challenge to get to the final, so therefore it didn't really bear much significance or meaning to them. So that's something to think about in terms of the formats of competition that we offer young people. Is how, to what extent do they offer a realistic challenge, and how challenging are they over time? So the next theme was, I called it proving. And this was quite surprising, actually. But then when you look at the past research, it made some sense. So there was this kind of tribal identity where you had these teams who, one of the real drivers for winning, and winning is important to them, but not as much as the challenge. So I should have noted that in the previous slide, actually, that yes, these boys do want to win, but they prefer to be challenged at first. So proving, they want to prove them to themselves that they're up to the task, and they enjoy proving others wrong. And when you think about it, this makes complete sense, because adolescence is a real time where belonging to a group is very important, and you're a sporting group, a sports team that you belong to in adolescence might just be one of the most important things groups that you belong to. So this offered some light as to why a lot of the boys had selected this hard opponent to play against, because they enjoyed the opportunity to kind of punch up and to prove the others wrong who might have doubted them. So that was quite an interesting concept. But the worry is sometimes that we try and create these strong identities within our own clubs and our own teams. And what a lot of the evidence has shown is that the stronger the kind of team identity, so the more that I feel for the team and the club, the more likely I am as an adolescent to be antisocial towards opposition. So that it's almost a double-edged sword, really. We're trying to create strong bonds within our teams and our clubs, but those strong bonds are often associated with bad behaviour externally. So that's something for us to remember as coaches when we are trying to connect with and amongst our players. So the third theme was pressure, and this was cited as a reason why some of the boys had dropped out, or some of them had moved teams or changed clubs, was the adults had put too much pressure on these boys to win. So remember, I mentioned that winning, was important to some of them, but challenge was more important. But when the pressure to win comes from adults, and these young people don't feel like that they've got the skills to cope, that turns into quite a negative experience quite quickly. But pressure isn't all bad. I don't want to label this as good and bad. So when you delve into it, there is an optimum amount of pressure that these teenagers do enjoy. But the key thing is that it's regulated by them. So they feel the pressure as a collective rather than an individual. So you'll see some of the quotes there that they're very much about the we rather than the me. And when these teenagers found themselves in situations where perhaps it was getting close to the end of the game, the outcome was on the line, it was really tough conditions, there was something riding on the game, a lot of them spoke really vividly and quite favorably about these moments. So a colleague of mine, Dave Piggott, who is much more experienced and has way more knowledge than I do about this sort of stuff. He's worth going down a rabbit hole on his research. He calls this clutch states. So it could be like the last 10 minutes of the game, the scores are level, we've just had a player sent off and it's really backs to the wall, and we might need these points or to avoid relegation or whatever it may be. But these moments, and I bet if you thought about some of the most enjoyable sporting experiences that you've ever had, they were probably quite close, uncertain moments, maybe where the outcome of a game is on the line. So you'll see the cards there. To frame up this, or one of the tasks that led to this result was, so with those 4 cards, you've got the uncertain underdog, uncertain favourite, certain loss, and certain win. The task was, on your own, just rank those in order. When you wake up on the Saturday morning that you play your games, who do you prefer to be as your team? And then we'll discuss those. So I guess if you were to do that with your players, what might you think that they would come up with? So you'll see maybe the surprising one there was certain win was picked bottom quite a lot. The consistency here is that the 2 uncertain cards came out on top for everyone, and the 2 certain cards came out on top. Came out bottom for everyone. So that led to some really good debate and discussion as to why, what led behind those answers. And uncertainty of outcome is one of the key drivers that makes competition exciting. So, and you can think about this when you take it back to your own days, maybe in the schoolyard, when you played games that were unregulated by the adults. What would you do? You would pick teams often so that they would be the most equal that they could be. Why would you do that? Because you want the outcome of that game over that lunchtime to be as uncertain as possible. And then if the scoreline started getting out of hand, what you would often do is mix the team rounds, maybe swap the best players over so that you would kind of restore that competitive balance. Because although we're going through a global pandemic right now, and uncertainty is one of the scariest things, in a sporting context, uncertainty is one of the most exciting things. And how often do we as adults arrange fixtures between groups of young people's teams because the spreadsheet says that we have to, when we know fine well that when those two play against each other, there's such a mismatch that there is no uncertainty of outcome, that everybody knows what the outcome of that game is going to be before the two teams set foot onto the pitch. And I think we need to try and question that more and move away from that, because it's really not what fun or competition is or should be about. So the last theme in the results was one called fairness. So one of the things that I was interested to find out was how these boys felt about something called competitive engineering. So you'll know what this is naturally. Golf has it, boxing does. Golf uses a handicap system, boxing uses weight classes. You would never put in boxing a heavyweight up against a flyweight, but we seem to do that a lot in youth sports, in team sports as well, or certainly in my sport, football. So I was interested to find out how these young people would feel about competitive engineering in a football context. So some of you might have seen things like power play, whereby if a team is winning by X amount of goals, the opposition can bring on another player, or if there is some kind of scoreline handicap system. But with these teenagers, a lot of those things were really dismissed. Interestingly, a lot of these boys played in an unregulated or unaffiliated local league on a Friday evening that isn't sanctioned by the Football Association. There's no adult involvement in that league other than the referee and the person who collects the money. So they go down, it's almost like a youth club type thing. They run themselves and they play often teams older or younger by up to 4 years. It is carnage by the sounds of it. I haven't been to see it myself, but it reminds me of when I used to play at that age myself informally. We've got kind of strict regulations, certainly in this country, and I think in America as well, in terms of who qualifies for what age group. So often you'll have a dateline cut off, and that those born post that date qualify for this age group. And that's traditionally the way that we've always done it. Now, here in England, you can play up an age group, but you can't play down an age group. And that can be quite a challenge to some of our late developers. So this was something that was discussed in the focus groups, and it was mixed feelings really, potentially because it's so new and it's not something that's been done before. It's, how would you feel about playing up, or even players playing down in your age group? Again, mixed views. But one thing that did come out quite strongly was that this view of meritocracy within youth sport. So I'll hold my hands up. I've been coaching the team who I coach now. They're under 16s since they were under 10. And until the last year or so, I would say that the playing time that I give has been egalitarian. So everyone gets the same amount of minutes, which is a lot easier to do when the players are younger, because you've got less injuries and things like that, less complications to deal with, smaller squad numbers. But that's been the principle that I've worked off, is equal playing time for all. But since doing this research and listening to the teenagers, and when you look back into child development, so there's a guy called Jean Piaget who's quite famous in terms of his work in child development. He suggests that children start life with a very kind of a meritocracy view of fairness, that everyone's equal and everyone should receive the same outcome. But as they develop more towards adolescence, they move towards more of a meritocratic view of fairness. So in other words, if you've put more effort in, then you should get more back out. So I started to explore this with the teenagers in terms of you know, what did it mean to them? And you know, a lot of them think that playing time, for example, shouldn't just be a given. So if you're the best player in the squad and you just turn up to training and you're not particularly trying, then it doesn't, you know, it doesn't matter if you're the best player. You shouldn't be getting as much playing time as somebody who's perhaps trying harder. So this really kind of opened my mind, and what it did is it led to some really good and healthy discussions about how would I, or how would we as a team go on with managing playing time. So we looked at, you know, commitment to turning up to training week in, week out, turning up on time, things that are well within the players' control often, just effort that the players are putting in. So, and that was, well, until everything shut down with the pandemic, I felt has led to a much healthier motivational climate within the squad, where you know, there's more of a sense of autonomy and control over, if I want more playing time, it's within my grasp. It doesn't hinge on whether I'm the best player in the squad or not. And that traditionally is what we've, whether we like to admit it or not, a lot of us will often give that playing time to the better players, you know, if we admit it, because the adults want to win the game. So I would urge you to kind of have those discussions with your players and find out what does fairness mean to them in terms of the way that you run your own teams. So what were the conclusions from all this? I think that we've got to re-examine the phrase non-competitive. I don't think it's particularly helpful. It kind of pushes things on you're either in this camp or this camp, and sport itself is inherently competitive. You know, some of us now could jump on a Zoom call and have a keep-ups challenge. We would turn it into a competition. So I think we've got to almost look at how we can get competitive and healthy back on the agenda together, because like I said earlier, it's been a bit of a taboo for a while now. Perhaps we need to look at the rules and how we qualify players for certain age groups. So this is something that has never really been challenged too much, and there isn't a lot of research out there that looks at, certainly not in a non-elite context, that looks at the impact of perhaps playing down. I know there's some countries over here in Europe that do allow that. We really need to give more of a voice and a choice to the young people who are competing, and it is the young people that are competing, not the adults. So you know, one of the proposals that I've made is that every league in the local area, every organization that offers competition for young people should have should be represented by the young people. So either a separate committee or a sole representative on the main board. So we've got to really start to engage with and listen to young people, because it's, you know, it is their game, it's their competition, and there is a lot of organisations out there that are starting to do this and having some really good outcomes off the back of it. I think that we also need to think about the expertise that we have on our sporting organisation boards. So if you've got a league who are running competition locally, often it's well-meaning volunteers who might not have the necessary experience or understanding of youth maturation and growth. So I think we need to really engage and reach out to make sure that our committees and boards are properly represented. I've put there bigger is better, and I added a question mark because I don't think there's too many things which kind of go in a linear fashion like that. I spoke at the start about locally here, we've got lots and lots of youth leagues, which does mean that we've got to, and I sit on the committee of one, we have to provide a good service, otherwise we'll lose teams. But I think that there is an argument for bigger is better. So bigger youth leagues give you more options in terms of how you match teams and how you can be a little bit more creative within the within competitive formats that you offer. So traditionally, what we've done over here is start in September, finish in May, just like the adults do. But you know, young people, some of you have got children. Some of them might well have played a whole season on FIFA today. So we've got to, I think, put out there competitive formats and experiences that reflect what motivates and excites these young people when it comes to football. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope it's made you think. I hope it's created some questions and comments and discussion and debate. And yeah, over to you, Sean. I'll pause for a second, have a drink.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack. Yeah, I actually had a couple of questions, and I'm sure we're going to get some more coming in as we go. So we'll get started with those. I guess the first one that I would have for you in this is on the basis of your research and your findings. What did you change personally when it came to coaching the players on the field with this, I guess, insight into their behaviours and what they wanted to see from the game? So with your organisation, did you make any significant changes yourself?
Yeah, great question. I've never been asked that before, but I think I'm a big subscriber or a big fan of a guy called Jean Cote. So he's done a load of research into youth sport, and one of the things that he talks about in terms of the role of the coach is he has a 4 C's system. So your role as a coach is to develop your players' competence, confidence, connection, and character. And just by initially doing the pilot focus group with the boys I coach, I felt really opened the door and connected us more. And then transcribing and reading and listening back and going through these quotes, which, you know, after a few months of sitting at a laptop going through this process, they really start to have an impact on your way of thinking. So it really got me thinking about everything that I do and everything that we are as a group, and how do we do things. So the playing time one is probably the biggest example. And you know, I actually, you know, sat down and said, have we got this right? You know, is this the way that you want things, you know, the way that we do it? And it was like, well, it might be a little bit better if, you know, if those who trained harder and more often were more rewarded. And I thought, why have I never really, you know, why have I never thought about that? Because I work in very black and white, simple ways, which I'm trying to get away from. But yeah, definitely had a huge impact in terms of my connection with the boys.
Did it affect, I guess, the culture that you were looking to create? I mean, we've seen a lot, I guess, on changes in culture and sports psychology coming into, you know, even grassroots football now. But did it kind of determine any behaviours that you felt that the players could be more engaged with, or that they could be more involved in the process of setting those behaviours that are an acceptable standard for your group on the basis of what you've seen as their wants and needs from this process?
Yeah, I think that any time that you can offer autonomy or tap into that self-determination with a group, whether it be a group of young football players, a group of employees that you manage as a team, you know, the self-determination work is pretty robust. So by offering that autonomy, I think, and listening and acting on, I think that's the most important thing. Is that people, there's only one thing worse than not being listened to, is being listened to and then not having anything done about it. So yeah, I think I can't remember the second part of your question there, Sean. I mean, mine was going off on a tangent, but did you say something about systems?
Just having them engaged in the process of setting the behaviours that, you know, are an acceptable standard within the group, as part of this whole process to, you know, develop an overarching culture that you want, I guess, the group to really, really benefit from.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, we'd done some work. I had a coach who was on his UEFA B with me a couple of years ago now, and he asked could he come and coach to get some experience. So I kind of brought him in, and I took almost like an assistant coach's back seat for half a season or so. And one of the things that we did together there was ask the boys, or we did a task with them to try and find out what were the kind of core values of this team. So there's plenty of ways, I'm sure, many that are much better and much more rigorous than what we did, but we just simply printed out a list of values, which is just kind of an exhaustive list of words and gave each of the players this list and said, go away and come back to training next week in 7 days' time and go through all these words, have a look at them at different times of the day and times of the week, and just highlight which ones are important to you when you think about this team. And what we did was just really simply collate in, I think there was we had a squad about 16 then, take in and just collate together and did a kind of little frequency analysis. What were the most common words that were coming out? And the two most common words were loyalty and respect, which then, a year or so down the line, when we started asking about fairness and rules and things like that, well, if you're showing loyalty and respect and you're committing and working hard, well, that's what you should be rewarded with in terms of opportunities to play. It's not to say that, there are people that perhaps miss a training session who turn up and, don't get on the pitch. I should make that abundantly clear. We've still got some minimum parameters that we work by. So everyone gets a minimum of a quarter of a game, for example. So if you haven't trained for a couple of weeks, and you're still turning up, you're still going to get on the pitch and get a good 20 minutes. But those who've worked hard and those who've committed and shown loyalty and respect, should be rewarded with more.
Good. I guess this whole process, obviously, it was a long-term process for you in terms of research but what is the plan to continue it as part of, I guess, development plans, goal setting for the season, even for individuals rather than a group?
Well, the pandemic has kind of, I guess, got in the way a little bit, because what I was hoping to do with a colleague of mine was to take this research further, to do more focus groups, to get more data, and to then start to look at getting the paper published. So, we've been told that the paper is, we could submit it to a journal now and they would probably publish it, depending on the journal, of course. But what we want to do is really try and understand and get some more depth and breadth to this. So, like I said at the start, it is, it's a small sample. It's just a group of three football teams in the northwest of England talking about, football. You can't really generalize from this, but I think, it can make you think a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I'll give the hand over to some others now, rather than asking my own questions. So we had a question from Noel, and again, this is one that I find interesting because I think it's something that really needs to be looked at. The concept of playing down, I guess, and up is an interesting one, and I think alongside biobanding, this can be of benefit. How do you think it can best be incorporated on a larger scale, and I guess within internal groups? If you're an organisation or club with a lot of teams, is it something that done internally to manage that part of it?
Yeah, good question. So the biobanding was something that I looked at in the research, and there's some interesting stuff out there. So on the surface, I think what I would do, if this is something that you're interested in, have a read into a guy called Sean Cumming. I think he's down at the University of Bath, and he's done extensive research around biobanding in a football context. But there was some results that suggest, on the surface of it, do we want kids playing in competitive environments where they have a chance? Well, yes, they tell us that, but what they also tell us is that playing with their friends is a really strong motivator. And so there was a study done, I think, where they had some players play in a biobanding setting. Obviously, some of them were chronologically playing down and some of them were chronologically playing up, but biologically they were on a more even playing field. And again, this is Cummings' work, so hopefully, Sean, that I don't butcher it, but the players found it interesting and a different challenge, but they still valued playing with their own age group. And I think New Zealand have done something similar, or tried to do something similar in a youth rugby setting. So they tried to incorporate biobanding because, there's probably not too many sports where having a mismatch in physical maturation has such a detrimental effect. So you could get a kind of 6-foot player in, let's say, under 13s playing against someone who's 4 foot. and half the weight. So I think they tried it in New Zealand, but the bounce back effect was they and I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong on this, but I think what happened was more players started dropping out of youth rugby in New Zealand than they'd had experienced previously, because they were being forced to play in a situation where they were being split up from their friends. So it's adult intervention, again, done with the best of intentions, but there's unintended consequences to nearly every action that we have. And it's definitely worth exploring them. So biobanding, I think, is useful as a tool. I don't think it's a silver bullet, but I definitely think it shouldn't be taken off the table if we're going to look at alternative ways of providing healthy competition to young people.
Do you think there's an age that this really needs to not introduced, but not introduced before, I guess, and maturation? It comes at different rates in different age groups, and obviously that's when things physically can change so quickly, but we cannot ignore the psychological development and mental development aspect of a kid who's still 12 months younger. He may be taller, but he's just emotionally immature because he's 12 months further behind in his development, just in that sense.
Sorry, Sean, carry on.
No, I guess that's the question, in how we balance those two when it comes to things like biobanding and relative age effect, because obviously we've all seen the results of that when it comes to elite level players and teams.
Yeah, and I'm again certainly no expert in this field. There's plenty of them out there worth looking at, but yeah, I think the assumption that we can often make as coaches is that bigger equals more mature, but it's definitely not as straightforward or as simple as that. And even within the research groups or the teams that I interviewed for this research, there was a clear distinction there was a clear difference in what people viewed as fair, based on, I guess, you could say, on their maturation, on their playing maturation. So those who were more mature as players in terms of they play, tended to view fairness on a bit more of a kind of nuanced scale than those who are playing, I guess, less mature players, and I use that term very carefully, who just saw fairness in terms of playing up and playing down as black and white. Yeah, yes, no. Either it should or it shouldn't be. So I think there's something interesting in that, in terms of the young people's maturation and how they view these what can be quite complicated issues that they face.
I think one way, I guess, around that, of your research kind of into being very involved in asking the players the questions, rather than, like I said, parental intervention, adult intervention can cause that just to happen. But taking the viewpoint and perspective of what the child player wants into it can determine whether that's something that's going to, like I said, instead of wanting to play with their friends, they want to be challenged. Is there a balance between the two that we need to take their feedback and, I guess, their parents' feedback on before we make those decisions?
Yeah, definitely. And this is where I feel for, those of you out in the States who are based in the more rural areas, because there's certainly opportunities to be more creative with the way that you build competition. But I know of the problems of having to travel out of town and out of state just to find a decent game. So look, I'm talking from a really privileged position where we're in the northwest of England is the most densely populated network of professional football on planet Earth. So, you could go down the road 20 minutes and find 20 different professional clubs. So that provides us with much more opportunity to keep friends together and have enough teams in the local area to organise a good competitive game or division or competition, whatever that may be. But wherever you are, I don't think it should mean that we should stop listening to the young people and find out more about what they want from the experience. Definitely.
Rob's asked a question about, in the US we have a pay-to-play model outside of the elite academy environments, and so when you talk about competitive and non-competitive development against winning, with a lot of coaches in this environment are battling the parents and their, I guess, cultural mindset in terms of winning is more important than development. So how do you foresee that being navigated?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think that we should stop putting these two things on a scale that are at opposite ends of each other, because they're not. And I think we should try and wrestle with this a little bit more and start looking at developing through winning and winning through development, rather than almost thinking that whatever decision I make, I'm a developmental coach or I'm a winning coach, because it just leads to this nonsensical tribalism that is really, really not helpful in youth sport. So, but I do understand, and I do get and empathize with a lot of the people. And I think one of the problems that we've got, and you guys have got, is the incremental pay and play model is almost turned the relationship into a transactional one, whereby, Sean, you're a parent of and your son plays for my team. You're paying top dollar to send your son, and this is typical of cultures. You want outcomes, and often the outcomes that you want are easiest viewed in terms of black and white. What's the scoreline, what's the balance sheet say, and we've got to start shifting that. And I think we've swung the pendulum quite a lot the other way, where we're going, right, we can't have scorelines anywhere, we can't publish results, and I know that can have an impact. But there's some cultures that have kind of found, I think, a bit more of a middle ground, where the adults just understand that it's healthy to win and it's healthy to lose, and it's healthy to throw away a lead and experience that, and it's healthy to come back and draw. And actually, your football experience should be a little bit like your education, broad and varied. I see there's plenty of teams around here, and I'm sure there are where you are, who win every game, and the adults often really enjoy that. And the time when they maybe don't win a game or they lose a game, the behaviors that I witness are extreme, to say the least. And it's because they haven't, those players and those adults, perhaps their football experience hasn't been, particularly balanced. It's almost like they've chosen one subject from the start of school and only done that subject all the way through. And they haven't maybe necessarily develop the skills to cope with these different situations. Because let's face it, if we're in this to develop professional players in our own setting, unless of course you're working in an academy, in which case things may be slightly different, but the odds are against us. So we've got to think about actually what are the longer term aims. For me personally, I don't want to impose this necessarily on anyone, but my long term aim is to make sure that the boys that I coach, they're 16 now, but how great would it be if they're still playing when they're 36, 46, 56, 66 even, if I've done enough to keep them in the game for the rest of their lives, hopefully by helping them to enjoy the game and, dare say, improve a little bit, then yeah, I'm happy with that. But it's about keeping that long-term aim at the front all the time.
You, I guess, when we're talking about that connection between parents and players and coaches, especially I guess in the younger age groups, when we're trying, I guess, form that level of goal setting, those targets, those long-term outcomes, do you think the communication of those is really the most important aspect, so they don't get those unrealistic expectations? Like, instead of winning every game, if they lose a game, it's the end of the world. So we can keep them enjoying the game and be appropriately challenged and developing.
Yeah, well, I mean, what do you think about that? What age group do you coach?
I work for the last 2 years with the younger U9 through U12, so the foundation phase kids. And now I'm technical director of the club here that has U9 through U15. So seeing a different range, and I worked with Dynamo Academy kids, the youngest age group game. And when they lost the game, it was the end of the world. I feel we built a level of trust and understanding with the parents in terms of they understood the process. So the parents understood. The kids got upset because they hadn't lost a lot of games. Parents kind of understood that this wasn't the end of the world, that they'd seen the development over 2 years and they wanted that to continue. and understanding that the players, our sole aim is to get the players to fall in love with the game. So when they have to choose or they don't want to play anymore, they choose football, they choose soccer instead of choosing the American sports, baseball, basketball, football, which is a huge competition level for us here.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, this probably goes back to what were the things that I got out of the original research, was an appreciation for just what these young people value from competition. And like I've said, winning is enjoyable, but only when you've had to work hard to achieve it. So if you've won easy, it's really not enjoyable. And actually, and this is one thing I would say, if you are tasked with, well, all of us, I guess, who work in a youth setting are tasked with having a relationship with the parents of those that we coach. Well, firstly, it is a relationship, and it's a relationship that is built on often us having to influence. And what I've found is that if you want to influence somebody, you need to have a good relationship with them, a positive relationship with them. So I guess if we're talking dominoes, that would be the lead domino, is have that good relationship with the parents in the first place. And that might be finding a common ground. You might not agree on everything, but I think it's all right to disagree on things. In fact, it's quite healthy, which is why I asked a lot of you to disagree with something that I said tonight. But have the relationship. Once you've got a good relationship, you can influence. And then just remembering that they want challenge. Challenge is more important to these young people than winning often. Now, not for everyone, and there will be outliers, and you will probably coach players where they will have been brought up that it is winning at all costs. But I bet it's not all of them, and I bet if you dug deep enough, you would start to explore just how much they value the struggle and trying to rise to the occasion, if you like. But you don't know until you start having these conversations.
Did this, I guess, the challenge aspect inform your training methods in terms of being sure that there was always that appropriate challenge in every session that you run, especially if you knew that you were kind of against a team that maybe wouldn't be such a challenge at the weekend, and that's what the players craved? Yeah,
well, we don't have that problem really, because the team that I coach, we've been one of the teams with the kind of less favourable win-loss record for quite a few. Ever since we moved to 11-a-side, we fell victim of the late birthday effect. So we've been gradually playing catch up ever since. But the weird thing is, although I think at under 14s we probably had in the regular season we maybe had a -100 goal difference, and yet we were still getting more and more players asking, could we come and join? Players from teams who were winning. So I don't think I'm a particularly good technical coach, but through my own experiences as a player their age, I probably figured out more about what I didn't enjoy about training more than what I did. And so those experiences I've used to shape, what I think is a motivating and enjoyable climate in training. So maybe, my views around training and practice, you might call it, haven't changed so much, because that's something that I've believed in for quite a while now. That my job is to go out and work with coaches and to educate and develop coaches on training sessions. So I've probably seen quite a lot of coaching sessions live compared to your average human. So you get that kind of sense of consistent things that seem to motivate and work well across a spectrum of players, whether that be working with a 7-year-old who's just started, or a 27-year-old who's making a living out of the game. The sort of things that motivate those aren't a million miles apart, to be honest with you, and often they look and feel like what it is play at a weekend, which is the match.
Someone's asked, do you think that having this process for coaches as well would be beneficial, because it's why are we not doing the same thing with coaches within the English coaching system and the qualification process and the increasingly restricted systems of certification?
Yeah, so is that, sorry, I lost you for a sec there, Sean. Let me just see if I can yeah. So was the question, should we be doing this research with coaches?
Why are we not doing the same with coaches within the English coaching system in terms of the qualification process and the increasingly restricted system of certification? Or are we?
I'm not sure I understand the question. So I know that there's obviously within our coach education system, there is, I guess, minimum requirements in order to get onto a level. So, for example, I'm assuming this coach might be talking about a UEFA B or an Advanced Youth Award. So there's certain requirements in order to get onto the next level. Is that the question, Sean? I'm trying to find it on the screen.
Yes, one says it's great that we're now listening to the participants in youth sport to help develop better ways of communicating with them and changing our adult thoughts on how youth sports should be run. Why are we not doing the same with coaches?
I've got you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess where we're going in terms of an association is personalized and connected learning experiences. That's what, in terms of us at FA Education, with an FA hat on now, that's where we're going. What this coronavirus has done is kind of speed up our thinking on that. So I think what education globally is waking up to is that there is alternate methods out there. I've been listening to a lot of interesting stuff from higher education institutions, looking at how are they providing education now, but B, how are they going to adapt to the future. And I think I'm quite excited about it. There's not much I can kind of say on a live webinar to 100 plus coaches, or that I know. But what I think will happen is that we'll begin to see a coach education system that is much more personalized in terms of, so Sean, you might log on to Netflix after we finish this conversation, and Netflix will give you, it's really good at this, it will give you all the content that it thinks is relevant for you. I think that what we want to do is move towards a coach education system that isn't so linear, and that isn't so, what would be the word? I guess equal in terms of everyone receiving the same content at the same time. We've got an opportunity now, or we're starting to take the opportunity to hit pause and think, how could coach education be more personalized and connected in the future? So I think I hope that answers the question, anonymous attendee. But that is certainly where the thinking is at the moment, and the direction of travel that we're heading. It's quite exciting, actually.
I think that can be facilitated by, I guess, more of a mentorship program, where an individual coach educator has the ability to kind of learn. We know how to coach players, we learn about players, and we know what our words, our decisions will affect them as individuals as well. A coaching education forum, maybe you don't have that luxury, apart from if it's a more individual basis.
Yeah, sorry, Sean. It sounded like you're underwater a little bit there. You keep going quiet, but I think I picked up the it sounded like your microphone's covered. I think I got the gist of the question. Yeah, in a nutshell, I would say yes. What we've done is move our coach education since 2016 to a more bespoke, I guess, in situ based. So previously, we would, you would come along. You've probably done some of the qualifications yourself, have you, Sean? What have you done? Some of the English ones?
I did the first FA level 1 before I moved out here, and I've done the US licensing since I've been here. Okay,
so I'll give an example. I did my UEFA B in 2006, and I'll never forget it. So we did the I think 9 days straight of content. We went away, completed a portfolio of work, and then in the summer months, I think it was June, hottest day of the year, we came back and we all participated in a weekend's worth of assessments. So I would play in like most of the sessions because I could run around back then, and then I would go and coach a couple of sessions, and so we all knew each other as coaches, but we didn't. We were all, we had ex-pros and people who hadn't played the game for 30 years, all on the same pitch. So what we've tried to do, there's some great benefits to that. Those people, there's still a good number of people that I met on that course that I'm still in touch with now, and some have risen to some really lofty positions in the game. So it's great that you can make those connections on coach education courses, which I would urge anyone that does do a course face to face or online is to connect with your other learners. What we've done now is move towards. So Sean, if you were on your UEFA B with us here in Liverpool, mm-hmm. you might well be in my kind of cohort, and then I can spend a much more focused amount of time with you throughout the season. So I would come out and see you 3 times and work with you a minimum of 3 times. It might be that you train on the pitch that's just around the corner from the house here. So I'd mic you up, film you, and then we would send you that video, and you would then be given the chance to kind of reflect on your own coaching. And then what that would lead is to a more bespoke and individual discussion between you and I. So the boundary, I guess, our relationship is one more of you mentioned mentor mentee potentially. It moves towards more of a coach development relationship than just a pure assessor. And so we've been on that path for nearly 4 years now, and I think that as technology improves, I can only see that was going further down that rabbit hole, because there's no reason, Sean, why you couldn't send me a video of you coaching, the last time you coached, whenever that was, maybe a couple of months ago. We've all got the technology in our pockets now for you to film your session. You could ping it over to me, taking advantage of the time zones. By the time that you wake up the next morning, you could have some critical feedback on your own coaching. And there's no reason why people on the call here couldn't do that amongst themselves.
One of the things that you've seen to be, I guess, most valuable when it comes to helping these coaches develop. I mean, I've always looked at it and kind of over the last year looked more at self-reflection as being the most valuable tool, but getting feedback and advice from more senior and coaches who are further along in their journey has been incredibly valuable. In this last 4 years since you've changed that, have you seen a change in the behaviour of coaches that you've worked with, or the coaches that have gone through the process that you see now, a difference in them because of it?
Yeah. So what did you say you preferred? Did you say you preferred the feedback or the self-reflection, or where were your views on it at the moment?
I've found self-reflection to be the most valuable tool. But then it's always good to get that either confirmed in terms of my views were, or to be challenged on them, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think if you can take the time to self-reflect, then that's the most valuable time as a coach to improve yourself.
Yeah, I think it probably depends on your knowledge base at the start. So I'll give you an example. We have been doing some online training by and he won't mind me mentioning his name because it's free advertising for him, but a guy called Keith Daniel owns a company called the Media Group, and they do presentation. They set up a lot of the events that we run at St George's Park. They kind of do all the lighting and what have you. Now Keith's got a background in media training, so he's been doing some training with us where we've been on a Zoom call. We've had to present. I had to do a 1-minute presentation on the vegetables that I've got growing out in the garden behind me, and then get some feedback. So my knowledge and understanding of presenting is at a level, but Keith's is of a much higher level. So in that respect, feedback is going to be really useful for me. And as a professional presenter, which I've said I don't think I am, that's quite useful. But I think the more that we can shift coaches towards not having to rely on feedback and asking themselves more critical questions and having the honesty to face what, you know, can be often uncomfortable answers, I think the better. And that's one thing that I try to do with the coaches that I work with, you know, in qualifications or otherwise, is to, you know, the video doesn't hide anything. It's a very useful tool to start some discussions, especially when you add a little timestamp to the corner. So what I'll often do is I'll sit with my stool and my headphones on, and I'll be watching you, but I'll have started the stopwatch off in front of the GoPro, and I'm just listening for what I would call critical moments in the session and just make a note of them. But then what I'll ask you to do is, okay, when you get in the car on the way home, just have a think of, instead of putting the radio on, just keep it off and just think about what were the critical moments in that session for you. And whatever they are, good, bad, indifferent, even if those are the right labels, but what stuck out, just note them down. You could do it on your voice notes, you could do it on a piece of paper and a pen, but just note down those key moments and what stuck out for them. And then what I found, that is a really good jumping point for us to then have a discussion. So you and I might jump on a Zoom call or meet up in person. Okay, what were your key moments? Okay, there was this point around 25 minutes. Okay, so we'll skip to that in the video. Let's watch that back, and let's, you know, pause and discuss. If it's something technical in nature, then we can always rewind and look at what the players are doing. What can you see? And I think that it's certainly given me as a coach developer much more opportunities to do things that I've never had the chance to do before. And even, you know, I'm talking only 6 or 7 years ago, that, you know, just by finding creative ways to use the technology to, you know, with the end goal in mind of you becoming a more critical thinking coach, rather than just kind of using technology for the sake of it, you know, for, you know, something that looks or is pretty.
Have you found that when you've been working with coaches, their mindset coming in determines a little bit how responsive they are to that feedback and the process? You know, we talk a lot about growth mindset and things nowadays, as they're the people who are most inclined towards success because they're more resilient to failure, I guess you would say.
Great point. Yeah, I do. And I think it goes back to, there's a lot of parallels with the coach-parent relationship. So if you don't trust me, or if you don't think that I've got your best intentions at heart as a coach developer, I've got no chance in terms of making any realistic long-term, you know, behavior changes in you as a coach. So the skill set of a coach developer is actually becoming, or when you look at it, it's quite broad. You've got to have the subject knowledge. You've got to be a kind of a generalist in a lot of areas. So you've got to have the subject knowledge of not just the game, but all the different ologies, that, if you like. And then you've also got to be able to quickly establish credibility and relationships with people that, you know, have maybe decades of experience in the game at, you know, in some respects, the top level. So that can be quite a challenge sometimes, but it's a good one. If you truly want to make the game better, then, you know, it's up to me to develop those relationships and that trust.
That lead into, I guess, players as well when you're coaching your own group. Has it helped to develop players with more of an open and growth mindset and more leaders within your group, because I guess they feel empowered throughout this process of being engaged in the goal setting and their voices being heard aspect?
Yeah, that's interesting actually, because I wonder if I can dig it out. I was at the UK coaching conference last summer. It was at Loughborough University, and one of the presenters put up something, and it was a really useful slide. I'll try and dig it up and send it to you. But basically, it was a quick questionnaire that you could ask your players to find out, almost like a barometer of the motivational climate. So I thought, the poor boys I coached, they're almost like a testing ground. But I thought this is really interesting, so I sent it out to them. And what I got back was that overall the motivational climate was quite empowering. I was really pleased with that. But one of the things that I clearly didn't do was to encourage the boys to ask enough questions. So that's something that I've tried to do, is not just get feedback, but to ask more questions and ask better questions. So I think I can probably find it somewhere in my photos. I took a photo of it, but yeah, that was quite a piece of feedback. Yeah, I've got it here. So I can probably put this on the screen here. Don't know if you can see that coming up.
It's staying up on the way your eyes very small because your screen's still being shared.
Ah, well, that doesn't really help, does that? So, it's 5 questions, and I'm sure you can pick this up off the recording. But number 1 is I give my athletes choices and options, and then it's a range from strongly disagree to strongly agree on 5 points. I answer my athletes' questions fully and carefully. So that was the one that I actually scored badly on, or scored the word. And I say badly, it was like, I think 3 or 4 out of 5. So what I realized was it wasn't that I didn't answer the boys' questions, is that I didn't get enough questions from them. So what that then encouraged me to do was, empower them to have a voice and a choice, and to challenge me in a respectful way, obviously. But give me some questions that I can answer. So that's been a really good one. The third one was when I ask my athletes to do something, I try to explain why this will be good to do so. Number 4, it is important to my athletes. Sorry, let me restart that one. It is important my athletes do their sport because they enjoy it. And the 5th one is, it's important that my athletes participate because they really want to. So there's 5 questions that you can give to the players that you coach to almost get a little bit of a yardstick on, where the climate is right now. And if you want me, I can send you a screenshot of that that I'm sure you could ping out.
I think that would be great. Do you think that's something that coaches could use proactively?
These
are my targets. Use them proactively. So they get these questions at the start of the season. These are my targets for the season, and I'm going to see how I've done at the end of 3-month period. I'm going to ask this is what I want to do. Let's ask the kids after 3 months, have I managed to achieve this in their mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And do you know what? That if we're talking about how winning and development and outcomes, and in a target-driven, like Western societies that we live in, what are some useful metrics that we can hang our hat on and work towards? That is a really good starting point. So yeah, I would fully agree. So almost taking a score or a snapshot of where we are at the start of the season. Mm-hmm. Let's work towards, and let's review it. I fully agree with that, Sean. I think that would be a much better way of shifting the focus away from the one outcome that is really way outside of any individual's grasp, and that's the score in the league table.
Yeah, I think that'd be something that coaches can use to set their own targets, and players can maybe be aware of them at the start of the season. So it's certainly something that, I would find that super beneficial, and I know our coaches would. Some last question, I guess, because we've kept you long enough, I think, Jack.
Put the barbecue on.
But Chris has asked, and I think this is something that's come up again pretty recently in a lot of different, I guess, sports psych kind of areas. How important is the use of language when talking to players? Yeah. This one specifically asked about moving players down, but any kind of language that is used when interacting with players, I think, is something coaches need to be very conscious of.
I would agree. And I'll give an example. There's a lot of talk around NLP, and it's not something that I particularly subscribe to. However, so when I got some feedback on my vegetables presentation, Keith gave me some feedback. So he said, you did this, this, and this well. And then he said, but, and then suddenly gave me everything else. And so all I listened to was the negative, I guess, the critical stuff, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's yeah, how sometimes subtly your language is what we as adults often think is maybe a throwaway comment or doesn't get noticed. I think from experience with younger players, younger people, they pick up on absolutely everything. They've got such a finely tuned radar, which makes evolutionary sense, I think, when you think about it, in terms of having the ability to survive within a group and to fit in. So this process has definitely made me much more considerate about my own language, to the point actually where sometimes it's got a bit detrimental, and I've almost had paralysis by analysis, where I'm almost, overthinking what I want to say and then end up just freezing. So like with anything, there's a balance to be had, but I think if we can just be more understanding and appreciative of the impact that our words often have or do have, then it's going to make us a better coach.
I 100% agree. And from my perspective, Jack, this has been incredibly interesting, and there's a lot of stuff I think everyone who is here can take from it. I certainly appreciate your time. I hope everyone here also did.
Yeah, I've actually just got the screenshot here. If you want me to pop it into, I'll pop it into the chat.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is a test of my tech here, isn't it? It is a photo that I took from Loughborough. Let's see if that works. Give me 2 secs. There we go. If I say get a screenshot of that and then pop that in here. Is there a way of adding a document, or is it drag and drop with this?
I've never done it, so you're
Sean. We're getting there. And desktop screenshot. Doesn't seem to be. Oh, give it one go. I think I might have it then. There we are. That come up? I'll tell you what I'll do. I don't know if that's come up or not, but what I'll do, if it didn't work, I will. I'll send it to you, Sean, and then yeah, I'm sure you can send it out with any other documents that you wanna send it to.
Yeah, if you send it across to me, I'll send a follow up to everyone on the call who attended and
Great. Well, yeah. I mean, thanks for having me. And
it was a pleasure.
Thanks to everyone who tuned in from wherever you were on the globe, and I hope you're all safe and sound, and looking forward to getting back to some sort of football at some point whenever it returns.
Thanks, Jack. And everyone who's on and who's still around, we've got Thomas Gronemark, Liverpool's throwing coach, joining us on Thursday, and we've got another 3 sessions next week for anyone who's interested. But keep your eyes peeled for that information, guys. And thank you again. And Jack, thank you. Everyone else, enjoy the rest of your day, evening, morning, wherever you are.
Thanks, guys.